Welcome to Common Sense Defense. My name is Ptolemy Pruden, the host of Common Sense Defense. Today's episode is going to be about congressional efforts to protect Battle Force ships from the National Defense Authorization Act's decommissioning program. And so this episode is going to be important as it shows the Congress's efforts to save legacy platforms before replacements are available, which is really, really, really critical. I want to talk about basically today the Senate's efforts in doing that. The House had their efforts as well, and they passed the bill over to Senate, and the Senate is in subcommittee now. And I want to talk about what the Senate is doing to address this. So this is going to come from Subtitle C of the Naval Vessel section of the National Defense Authorization Act. And the section I want to talk about today is Section 1022 and also Section 1025. The 1022, it says, is about the amphibious warship force structure. Let me read this to you. It says, the committee recommends a provision that would amend Section 8062 of Title 10, the United States Code, to require that the naval combat force should include not less than 31 operational amphibious warfare ships, of which not less than 10 should be amphibious assault ships, and make other related changes. This is really, really critical because the Navy and the Marines were going back and forth about the numbers. Now, when you're trying to move a Marine amphibious battalion from one side of the Pacific to the other, or one side of the Atlantic to the other, you need a certain amount of platforms available. And so our nation has about 31 ships that we need for both the East and the West Coast to send our Marine amphibious division across those respective oceans. And so we're now in a situation where the Marines, because of the distributed platform they were going to be operating off of distributed the lethality platform, so the Marines are now going to in a position where they're going to be working kind of like an island hopping kind of concept, where it won't be about capturing, let's say, capturing all of China, as it would be capturing islands in the Indo-Pacific region to a landing here, a landing there, to make platforms available for surface anti-ship missiles or anti-air missiles, or taking over islands from the Chinese that they've captured. And so to do that, the Marines are trying to get a smaller platform, but in the same sense, they, I believe, want to make sure that they are able to retain the 31 vessels that they need to move their Marine amphibious divisions across the ocean. So the Navy, wanting to have more platforms available, or have more money for more platforms, wanted to whittle that down. So they were going back and forth a few months back about numbers. And so Senate just jumped in and said, look, that's enough of that. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to make an amendment and put this in law that there's nobody going to change anything. We're going to leave it at the 31 platforms, and not less than 10 are going to be amphibious assault ships. And amphibious assault ships are landing helicopter assault ships. There's the WASP class, and then we have the America class. So basically an amphibious assault ship is like an aircraft carrier, smaller than a nuclear aircraft carrier. It's about I think 800 feet long, plus or minus, and it is designed to have both fighter planes, the Harrier AV-8B, or the Lightning II, which is a F-35B, which they take off vertically. And so those platforms now can carry F-35Bs, and they protect the assault forces going ashore. But they also have the Marines on board, about 1,200 Marines on board that land in that traditionally land in LCACs, which are hovercraft that land on the beach. But now the newer platforms of the American class, and I believe the last version from the WASP class, the Macon Island, those have they have the V-22, which is a vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. That aircraft is what's used to ferry the Marines to shore, and that gives them more of a delta, some more space for protection. So they can basically insert troops from maybe 100, 200 miles away now, and that provides some protection for the landing helicopter assault ship. So that being said, the Navy is saying, not the Navy, but Congress is saying, hey, we want you to have no less than 10, and we also want to make sure that we keep 31 platforms available in total. Now, that's a big conversation because of the LPD-17 Flight 2, which is which is a San Antonio class assault ship. That platform is costs about $1.1 billion, and the Navy has been discussing how they want to truncate or end or conclude that platform series, and not produce anymore. So that's kind of the argument going on now, and that's primarily one of the things that I want to address, is because I feel that the Flight 2s should not be canceled, that they should continue to produce those from that platform is produced out of HII Huntington Ingalls, um, down in Mississippi. And so you're looking at all those people who are going to be basically unemployed in about a year and a half, 2 years, because they won't be able to develop or build that ship anymore. And then secondarily to that, there's also they also make the destroyers down there, for the Arleigh Burke 51s, and those are unless they get more orders there, then that's also going to impact that line of business for Huntington Ingalls and particularly Mississippi. So those are the things that's the big picture of what we're dealing with, and we have to understand that if we don't fight for each one of these line items, or if we don't fight for these platforms, we're going to lose them, and that's really why I'm focusing on this month on the Build Our Navy campaign. And the Build Our Navy campaign, as we kind of went through some of those points in the prior podcast, the Build Our Navy campaign is particularly designed to pump money back into naval infrastructure, pump that money back into making sure the battle force is the Navy battle force ships are up to par and not being depreciated. So we'll kind of talk about that. I'm going to go actually into the details of those in the next podcast, where we're in the section talking about asking Congress to build a Navy with a 5-year, 5-point naval building plan. I'm going to go through each one of those 5 points in the preceding podcast. But let's go back to Congress's efforts. So now I'm going to go to section 1025. This is called the prohibition on retirement of certain naval vessels. This is similar to the first phase. I'll talk about this now, and then I'll talk about it again when I get to this. But in my plan where it talks about placing a 5-year freeze on decommissioning ships, this would be that. This is basically the Senate's effort to say, look, we need to stop this now, and this is the best way we can do it. I just personally feel, Ptolemy Prudent just feels that they can do more to save the Navy Battle Force ships. Let's look at this right quick. It says, the committee recommends a provision that would prohibit the retirement of certain naval vessels in fiscal year 2023. The committee notes the budget request proposed to decommission 24 Battle Force ships in fiscal year 2023, which represents 8% of the Navy's 298 ship battle force. Of these 24 ships, 8 are at or beyond their expected service life, which is ESL, expected service life. And 16 ships would be retired prior to their expected service life. The average service life remaining in the early retirement is 16 years. The committee is concerned that retiring battle force ships prior to ESL will result in unacceptable risk to meeting fleet commanders' near and midterm requirements. They're saying exactly what I'm saying, people. It goes on, furthermore, the committee believes replacing these vessels would not occur quickly or affordably, with the average replacement unit cost for these 16 vessels exceeding $1 billion. So let me finish their section. I'll give you what I have to say. But the budget request proposing retiring 5 Ticonderoga-class cruisers over the next 5 years, including 1 cruiser in fiscal year 2023, which will complete extended modernization periods in fiscal year 2023 or 2024. You know, this is just amazing. You really can't make this stuff up. You know, the committee is saying, your Navy, what's wrong with you? You're trying to cancel ships that we've already spent hundreds of millions of dollars working on to fix, modernize, and you wanna cut them back. And so the committee knows, Armed Services Committee knows, that they need to save the ships as much as they can, because it's going to cost more to replace it. It's going to cost time to replace it. It's going to cost all this extra effort to save it. And you're only looking at $4 billion over 3 or 4 years that the Navy will be spending to upgrade, particularly the Ticonderoga class platforms. It's just amazing. When I say you can't make this up, when you see the level of just, oh, well, we don't want these more, let's get rid of them. That's not gonna be acceptable to the American taxpayers. It's not gonna be acceptable to our men and women in uniform, the Navy particularly, who needs to have advanced platforms, or at least have platforms. Period. And so when I say that we need to build our Navy, it is particularly that type of thing. It's saying, hey, don't cut the ships back, don't decommission ships, build more ships, and use what you have to the best of your ability. And so the next podcast, I'm going to be talking about the 5-point plan that I have, that will be talking specifically to the things that the Navy can do to build the Navy and strengthen the Navy. And I think, if in some regards, if the Navy can't do it, then Congress is going to have to make the Navy do that. And that's one of the reasons why in my plan I focus only on platforms that we're already developing, platforms that we're already building, platforms that we're already operating with, it, platforms that we're already maintaining. It's not adding anything that are not already familiar with in our system, or programs of record. And so that's why I believe that if we can just put some more investment right now instead of divesting from operational platforms, then we can make our Navy stronger. And then it's not slowing down or stopping robotic platforms coming online or any. I'm not trying to stop any of that. I'm just saying that that's down the road. That's 3, 4, 5, 7 years down the road, and in that time frame, our Navy can be, and our nation can be, vulnerable to um, to Chinese aggression in the Indo-Pacific or anywhere else in the world. So that's kind of what I want to talk about. But I want to make sure that I'm isolating the fact that Congress is making effort. And just a brief word about the House. The House and the House Armed Services Committee, they um, cut back the littoral combat ship, the LCS, so that the Navy wouldn't be able to retire all of those. I think they were trying to retire 10 of those platforms, or all of the LCSs, and the House said no, don't do that. And then the Senate is saying don't retire all the Ticonderoga class platforms. So you have both of the houses trying to do something to stave off pulling all those platforms offline. And so I think that if we don't do something now, we're gonna have a very major situation 2 years, 3 years from now. And I think that this is the time now that we want to make sure we call Congress and get in touch with them and say, don't let this happen, for national security purposes, and for ship workers and people who work, who are contractors in making defense platforms. All right, so I think that's going to conclude for today. But I really want to make sure and invite you back to the next podcast so that you can hear those 5-point the 5-point plans and the details of those. Because as we move into September, I want to make sure that everyone's on the same page about what we're trying to accomplish in reaching out to Congress to get them to change the National Defense Authorization Act as it relates to decommissioning ships in the future. Hey, we appreciate you. We appreciate you taking the time. And you know what? Go out there and be strong. We'll talk to you real soon.